Hey guys, what's going on? This is Pants R Dragon, and today we'll be doing a video on dynamic queue versus solo queue, and just my opinions on it, what I feel the pros and cons for each queue are, looking from both sides of the perspective, you know, that sort of thing. And also big thanks to Pro Guides. I highly recommend checking them out at ProGuides.com as you play your ranked games this season. Now there may be some other videos you've seen already about this subject, but my opinion might be a little bit more skewed and different because, well, the Master and Challenger community is quite small, and so when that happens with two types of different queues, you will get different feedback and results coming from the big communities versus the small communities. So yeah, basically my opinion might be very different from other videos you may have seen. Anyways, with all that being said, let's get started. So first off, we're going to be doing the pros of dynamic queue. And the first pro is you can play ranked with more than just one friend. So say you don't have 4 friends to play with, okay, let's go play dynamic queue with, 3 friends. And playing with your friends is a really good experience, especially if you're all really into the game. That's why they have sports community clubs like soccer and football and all that. It's a good way to bond with your friends, or well, break the bond with your friends. Either way, playing with your friends is usually a good thing. Next up, people in Champion Select, at least in the lower elos, seem to be a little bit less toxic, since people are getting their role and are happy. And I'd say that's a really good thing for the majority of the league community. That means there's going to be less assholes in your solo queue, you're going to get less frustrated and annoyed, and the experience for queuing for ranked is better. Unfortunately, this doesn't really help high elo and masters and challengers because, well, the community is not really that toxic, and everyone's kind of always like, okay, if I don't get my role, well, I'll play a second role, and they don't really complain, so it doesn't really affect, the high elo community. It just affects, like people in bronze, platinum, silver, and gold, and even diamond. But of course, it is for the bigger community, so it's kind of a good thing. But my perspective and opinions is coming from, the smaller community. The next good thing about dynamic queue is since you have a primary role and a secondary role to choose from, this means your skill is tested on your 2 roles that you choose from. So that means if you get really high up in the ladder and you're like a mid and jungle player, it means you're probably a really good mid laner and a jungler. And another good thing about this is you don't have to waste your time queuing up for a game and then all of a sudden getting top lane, which is something you don't want to play and get better at. And so basically what ends up happening is you don't waste your time, if of course you're kind of looking at it from that perspective. And the next pro is Champion Select is faster because, well, it forces you to click the lock-in button and ban a champion, because if you don't, well, it kicks you out of the game. So people are kind of learning that and just being like, okay, gotta lock in ASAP, and then they can like alt tab and do whatever after. And also in Champion Select, the power between everyone is equally dispersed, since banning a champion will go to players 3, 4, and 5, while players 1 and 2 will get first pick and second pick. And so basically everyone can be involved in the Champion Select, and making everyone a little bit more involved. I also like at the beginning of the game how you can hover over a champion and decide who you kind of want to play. Of course this could be implemented in solo queue too, but they're definitely trying to emphasize dynamic queue. But that's where my perspective of pros for dynamic queue ends, and I have a long list of cons for dynamic queue and why I don't like it. Okay, so first off, every time I fill a secondary, I always get support. And as you guys know, my primary is jungle. I've already played 8 games in dynamic queue, and only 3 out of 8 games were jungle. Well, 4 of the games were jungle, but one of the games I actually had to ask politely to someone if I could take jungle, and well, he gave me it. Even though I was considered a top laner according to dynamic queue. But yeah, it was pretty stupid. I didn't really get my primary role as much as I wanted. And basically what I'm saying is, if you ever pick Phil, you're basically picking support. If you ever have support as your secondary, well, basically make that your primary. And support is my secondary role, as, well, most of you guys know, if you have been watching my videos or stream, of course. And I'm actually pretty upset when a Season 5 Diamond player or Master player does get the jungle before I do. It'd be all good if there was an equal chance, but there's not really an equal chance because I either pick support or Phil, and then, well, it's basically skewed. And the thing is, if I don't actually pick Phil or support as my secondary, queue times, usually 8 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, but without it, 11 minutes, 30 minutes maybe. And in general, dynamic queues will increase queue times for the higher elo community because there's not a lot of people in it. And as dynamic queue is trying to find these roles for people who pick their primary and secondary, obviously, times are going to be so much more. So yeah, big con of dynamic queue are the queue times. If this were solo queue, it would take around 5 minutes depending on the time of the day. Like, I'm not waiting 20 minutes just to get plus 10 LP. I'd rather wait 5 minutes to get my 10 LP. and I'm fine playing whatever role and not getting my role. So yeah, queue times, big con. And next con, the removal of ranked 5s. Hey, I like making my team called Team Jizz, but now there's no identity in teams and it's just a bunch of friends playing together. Okay, well, that's basically what ranked 5s is, but no more teams, man. That kinda sucks. Not a big con, but for the next con, this one I really dislike. I can't AFK for the majority of Champion Select. I don't really care if I'm involved too much in a Champion Select or not, but it was just way easier when one guy had to do the bans and then we would just pick our champion. I'd much rather AFK for the majority of Champion Select, and then just pick my champion, runes and masteries, and I'm good to go. The lock-in requirement is also somewhat annoying, because sometimes you, at the last second, will want to change your champion, and then while hovering your champion you want to pick, you also can be doing your masteries and runes at that time, which is usually what happens when people hover a champion. Or, you know, they probably just AFK after they do that. But I guess after locking in your champion, obviously you can do the runes and masteries, but sometimes I feel like time is a little bit limited. And next up, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest cons, maybe talking throughout the community. Dynamic queue will be a joke because you can have a 5-man LCS team and wreck everyone and be at the number 1 to 5 spot of the ladder. So you can have like TSM, 5-man pre-mating every game. Yes, they will match up with other 5 pre-mates, but eventually they would probably get the number 1 to 5 spot. And essentially the best players for Dynamic queue will be a team of pre-mates because they'll basically be on communications. They have really good synergy with each other, and yeah, it'll be hard for, like, you know, that one solo queue player to get to the top of the ladder since, well, he doesn't have any partner in crimes. And another con that is related to this point is, say you have a 4-man pre-mate and you're that one solo queue player. You're probably going to be left out of their communication because they'll probably be on voice comms. The other team probably has a 4-man pre-made too, but the solo queue players, they're basically gambling because it's basically whichever team has a better 4-man pre-made. So I don't think the influence of the solo queue player will be that much as the other 4-man pre-mades. So in that way, it's somewhat stupid. Next up, Riot is trying to enforce dynamic queue by putting out solo queue later. The reason they're doing this is because a lot of people will side with solo queue, so obviously dynamic queue would be left behind, and just for a small majority of players who are interested in that idea. But it's still weird to me because no one really asked for dynamic queue, no one was really complaining about solo queue except, you know, team always holding me black, one person's feeding, blah blah blah, you know, that kind of stuff. And that is my list for cons for dynamic queue. Next up, we'll be doing the pros for solo queue. And first off, overall, I have an equal chance of getting jungle or my other fill role because of the pick order, so I won't be getting support every time. Queue times are shorter because it's not trying to put people who want their certain role with each other. It'll just be like 5 players versus 5 players, so, you know, queue time's shorter. Yeah. And then next off, it kind of shows your game knowledge because if you can't really adapt to other roles, it just shows how much you lack in overall game knowledge and not just one role. So I'd say solo queue bases your skill off your overall game knowledge. And solo queue is also better if, well, you have no friends. I don't play with anyone and I don't have no friends, so it's better for me. And you also have an equal chance as everybody else as getting your primary role because of how pick order is randomized, so it is balanced. And I would say this is where elo matters because it shows your individual knowledge of the overall game. As with dynamic queue, it basically shows which 3-man pre-made or 4-man pre-made or 5-man pre-made is better. And say a team is trying to recruit players, well, they'll just get a bunch of dynamic queue players who might not have the best mechanics but are really good with their pre-made team. Although, of course, solo queue, there are cons about it. First off, champion select can be a little bit toxic because people aren't getting their roles. That will only happen in like bronze to platinum, even diamond. But usually no one will complain in, you know, master and challenger and diamond 1. The next con is you can't play with 2 or more friends. That kind of sucks. But at least you can have a duo queue partner, and their influence on the game is not as much as the 3 other people. Unless, of course, they're Smurfs and they can basically carry the game. But the next con is that season wards are going to be more tendered to the dynamic queue instead of solo queue, because Riot wants people to play dynamic queue instead of solo queue. So you might not get your skin or border at the end of the season, but they might change it if a lot more people are playing solo queue than dynamic queue. And that is it for the solo queue cons. And finally, my conclusion of this topic. So basically, no one wants to wait 20 minutes to play a game of League of Legends. I'm against dynamic queue because, well, that's basically the biggest reason is I don't want to wait. I'm fine waiting 10 minutes, but for 20 minutes, like every game, I can't do that, man. Like, the queue times would be shorter if there were 10,000 challenger and master players. But, you know, sadly there can only be 200 challenger players and a few master players, like less than 1,000. so this is really bad for the high elo community. Although I do like the idea of 3 people queuing because they do have a big influence on the game, but the 2 other people definitely can make an impact on the game as well. But a 4-person pre-made with 1 solo queue player, that solo queue player is basically gambling on the fact of which 4-man pre-made is better. And honestly, I feel like no one really asked for a dynamic queue, to be honest. Maybe a little small majority of the people, but I think everyone was fine with solo queue. Like, apparently in Heroes of the Storm, people didn't want it, and it was a big letdown. In CSGO, at least they have voice communication. And yeah, I forgot to actually mention this in the video, but in one of my games, we had me, Hashinshin, Best Riven NA, I'm a Cutie Pie, and some mid laner, and Best Riven NA was top, and Hashinshin had his secondary as jungle, and then my secondary was support, so I failed as support, but I wasn't really paying attention to the champion select. We all know Hashinshin is a top laner, and I'm a jungler. There would have been a better % chance of winning if I were the jungler, and he was playing support. Obviously, if I noticed sooner, I would be like, yo, could I take jungle? And he would give it to me, and then he would play support. And this is just a really small problem that can easily be fixed, you know, just by asking the other player. But according to Dynamic Q, this is probably the best way we're probably going to win. So yeah, that is the end of my little rant or comparison with the two. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because, well, it's definitely a long one. It's definitely not like my other videos for sure, but I feel very strong about my opinion, and I just want to kind of give it out to you guys. And yeah, let me know in the comments below on what you guys think about dynamic queue versus solo queue. I really want to know what your opinions are, like are you for it, are you against it, etc. And make sure to leave a like if you did like this video. Anyways, I am Panzer Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.